Welcome to Multicultural Center in Krakow, operated by IB Polska, where we talk with interesting people living in Krakow. Today we're going to meet Anna. She is an immigration lawyer. Welcome, Anna.
Yeah, hi, hello, nice to meet you, and thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And my question is to you, please do introduce a little bit about yourself to our viewers.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a lawyer, I am an attorney, and I specialize in migration law. So I have over 10 years of experience right now with this branch of law. So my main task is providing legal advice in very different procedures concerning the legalization of your stay in Poland. So starting with temporary residence permits through permanent residency up to citizenship, but also in some different procedures such as international protection, humanitarian stay permit, or even expulsion proceedings. But I've also been involved in different kind of activities touching on migrants' rights in Poland. So, for example, advocacy, research, or human rights monitoring.
Thank you for introducing yourself. My another question is, which different type of permits that Krakow have?
I mean, there are two main types of permits allowing foreigners to stay in Poland, not only in Krakow but also throughout Poland, because this is the same legislation. So the main difference will be between the temporary ones and the ones that allow you to stay permanently in Poland. So the temporary ones is something that everybody applies, these are their first steps when they actually want to stay here for longer. They would apply for temporary residence permit, and as the name even explains, it is only for a specific period of time, for maximum of 3 years. And after spending more time in Poland or meeting some other conditions, you can actually apply for a permanent type of residence permit. And here this is a little bit tricky because we have two types of permanent residence permits. One of them is actually called permanent residence permit, and another one is called EU long-term residence permit. So once you actually establish yourself well in Poland and you want to stay here, then you can apply for the permanent residency.
So for the EU long-term permit, is there a specific requirement for this?
Yes, there are very specific requirements which are described for in law. First of all, the main requirement is that you have to stay in Poland for at least 5 years in order to be able to submit your application for this type of EU long-term residence permit. And these 5 years, they also have to be uninterrupted, as the law says. It doesn't mean that they cannot be interrupted at all. So like for 5 years, you cannot even go for holidays, because yes, you do. But if you go somewhere, then your travels should not exceed 10 months. Or like if a single travel should not exceed the 6 months period. Next requirements concern having a stable income, regular and stable income, both for the future as well for the past 3 years prior to submitting your application. And then you would be also required to have health insurance, so something you already know from temporary, as well as having a place to stay. And here we need a legal title to your premises, such as, for example, lease contract or even ownership at that point. So these are the main requirements. Of course, I forgot one of the requirements, which is relatively new, which is knowing the Polish language on the B1 level. So this one, I think, is like the most tricky, and lots of people have problems with that, because, okay, let's be honest, Polish language is not actually that easy. Exactly. So even those 5 years, you have to put some effort in order to learn the language and to actually pass the B1 exam.
So in this EU long-term residence card, you need to have a language, but with the residence card, do you still require a language?
I mean, for the temporary, no. So as long as because the temporary is the one that you apply for first when you arrive here, and that you can only get for a specified period of time, and then you can renew it. So in that case, there is no requirement to know the language. I mean, this is
but for the permanent residency, if we say,
I mean, for the EU long-term resident, yeah, which is type of a permanent residency, because also you have this other type of permanent. So permanent, you have permanent, which is actually called permanent, and permanent, which is called EU long-term. So for the, let's call it permanent, there is no requirement of the language, but this is also because this is a very special type of permit, which is, for example, given to those who are married to Polish people, so the spouses of Polish people. Okay. So in that case, there is no, I mean, the procedure is much easier for them, and there are no
they don't require
like
there will be no requirement for a language as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so for permanent residence, if you are married to a EU citizen, you don't require language, But if you are not married to a EU citizen, then you still need to have at least B1 level.
I mean, here we are talking with the Polish citizen, okay, so spouses of the Polish citizens, and indeed, if you are a spouse of Polish citizen and if you had your temporary residence permit based on that, then after a specified period of time, you can apply for permanent residency, and you don't need to know the Polish language, and you are not required to have the B1 certificate. But if you apply for the EU long-term residence permit, then yes, we do have this requirement.
So if we come to temporary residence card, there is different criteria that you can apply with, like student and some other criteria that they have?
Yes, exactly. I mean, in the law there is an exhaustive list of purposes of stay which allow you to apply for temporary residence permit, and each of these purposes of stay have different requirements. So the main ones will be, of course, employment. Then you will have business activity, you will have indeed students and education in general, you will have family reunification and other types, and each of them will have their own, I mean, there are some requirements in general for all types of residence permit, but then also each of them will have their own specific requirements.
Okay. So when we are talking about temporary card, is there any deadlines to apply for temporary residence card?
Yes, there indeed is a deadline. So thank you for this question, because this is it's a very important topic. Because when you apply for your temporary residence permit, you have to submit your application during your legal stay in Poland. So this means that you have to submit your application before your current basis of stay expires. So maybe you came here with a visa-free regime, so you could have stayed for 90 days. Maybe you had a visa that allowed you to stay for a certain period of time. Maybe you already had a previous temporary residence permit which will soon expire. You have to be very careful to see until when you can stay in Poland based on this title of stay that you currently have, and you have to submit your application before that deadline expires. This is the most important condition, because if you miss your deadline, basically it is very difficult to do anything about it, and in most cases you will be obliged to actually leave Poland and then come back again later. So you have to remember about the deadlines. Now, maybe important thing about those living in Krakow and submitting their application here, because also when you submit the application, you have to do it in person, not only to show the original documents to the migration office, but also to give your fingerprints. But it's not possible to just go and say, hello, I'm here today, I was just passing by, so I want to submit my application, because there are many applications and many applicants coming every day. So this is why you should contact the migration office beforehand. You should email them with your personal details, and then they will book a date and the time for you, and you can actually come and submit your application. But here also please be careful, because if the migration office proposes you to come on a day which is actually after your current visa or residence permit expires, then you should not wait. But you should prepare your application papers and you should send them by post with a registered letter before your current legal stay expires. Once you have the confirmation from the post office that indeed you did send your letter on a specific day to the migration office, then in case of any control, you are fine. You are just waiting for the migration office to contact you and then invite you on a specific day to come and give your fingerprints.
Okay, thank you for detailed information. It definitely for our viewers it will helpful. My another question is actually related to the same. The people who comes here for like tourist visas, can they apply, or is there any possibility for them to stay if they come and they visit here and they like to stay maybe more than planned? Is there any other possibility for them?
This question is a little bit tricky for me, because it is not very clearly described in the law. Because basically, if you come here on a tourist visa, then this means that your purpose of stay here is just to spend a little time visiting. And if you apply for a temporary residence permit, you have something that requires you to actually stay a little bit longer. So basically, in that case, you change the purpose of your stay. For me, it is of course possible, because you can come here for 3 weeks as a tourist and love Krakow so much that you want to stay here, and you actually find a job quickly, and then you can submit your application for temporary residence permit based on, for example, employment. So basically the law would not say that this is not allowed, because it is allowed to change the purpose of your stay, yet in practice sometimes you might have questions concerning the fact that you did change the purpose of your stay and how exactly it happened. So I guess that this situations may be assessed individually, you know, so on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so
But
much.
I would understand so much somebody coming to Krakow and actually wanting to stay here longer than just a tourist.
Yeah, because it's a very pretty city. You can't, do people come here, they don't even want to leave afterwards.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
The another question I have regarding the same, because I heard like in Krakow, it's like the fastest city to get a residence permit. Despite it can be a temporary residence permit. But I heard also other side that there are many cases they are pending right now, and they try to reach out to some of the people, but there is no reply. So could you please let us know?
Well, I don't have any exact statistics about how long it takes in different cities, but indeed from my experience, the migration office in Krakow is really well organized and is processing the cases relatively fast. It has to be said here that in Poland some years ago we didn't have that many applicants that wanted to get a residence permit, but since that time the number of applicants grew like really a lot. If you look at the statistics here, I mean, this is like climbing like that. So this is the main reason why it takes so long for the cases to be processed. Now I'm sorry, I'm lost.
Yes.
I'm allowed to my mistake. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, so basically this is the reason why it takes so long, that there are so many applicants and there is not enough inspectors. So the inspectors are really doing their best and they are doing what they can to process all the cases, but indeed there is quite a lot of them. Basically also from my personal experience, it is relatively easy to contact your inspector and to know what is happening with your case. Of course there may be exceptions also, but in general we have this website Info OPT, which also is very good, and with like there is like the info line, and there is also the possibility to reach the office by email, and basically it is fairly easy to know what is happening with your case if anything else is needed.
So they will let us know by call and by email directly?
I mean, no, if you want to know what is happening with your case, then the best way to contact them is by phone or by email. Usually they would respond to you within 3 working days. But if the office has to contact you, then sometimes they would email you. So please make sure that you check your email, but they are also legally obliged to send any request by post. So here you have to be very careful to know your postman and to check your mailbox regularly, because if you miss a letter and if you don't respond, then it has some very negative consequences for your procedure.
Okay, so they can deny the application because I didn't receive the letter, or
yes,
can
this is also possible if they send it to the correct letter, to the correct address that you provided in your documents, and you don't pick it up for any reason, then it is considered as if you actually got it. So if you don't respond, then the inspector may even close your case, and without you even knowing. So this is why you have to be very careful. And also, for example, if you change address, you have to notify the migration office as soon as possible. You also, if I can come back to the previous subject, because you asked me about the length of the procedure. So again, Krakow is really doing a great job here. But also I wanted to say, because legally right now we don't really have any procedure to expedite our cases. But I think that if you have any special circumstances, so maybe for example someone is sick at home and you really want to visit them, then I would really advise you to contact your inspector, explain your situation, if possible then also show some documents that confirm the circumstances, and then if possible again the inspector may try to expedite your case and issue a decision a little bit faster. So I think that's the best way to proceed, but again this concerns some really special circumstances for which you really need your residence permit as soon as possible.
So for example, someone is sick in India, just example, they can it will consider as special circumstances or no?
I think so. I mean, if your relative, for example, is very sick and they need a surgery and they need you to be there, to hold their hand, but also, for example, to help practically at home and with the recovery, then if something like that happens, then I think it really makes sense to contact your inspector, explain the situation, maybe attach some medical certificate, and then they will try with their goodwill. I'm sure they will try to do what they can to make it faster, of course, within some limits that are also independent of them.
Okay, so the person who actually assigned to your case, the inspector, as you said, how person got to know the information of that inspector to reach out?
Well, sooner or later you will receive some kind of a letter from the migration office about your case. So always at the end of the letter you will have email address to your inspector. And if you want to know prior to receiving any correspondence, then you can also email the migration office at their general email address. And then you can ask who is your inspector, you can ask them for your email, and also then it's good to ask about your case file number, because whenever you need to contact the migration office you should know this number, because this is how they find your case, and so that they are able to respond to your questions.
So my next question is regarding Karta Polaka. Can you give us a little information regarding this?
Well, Karta Polaka, the Polish card, is something specific. This is not actually a residence permit. I think this has to be said and underlined in the beginning. This is a document that confirms that you have Polish roots. Polish roots meaning that your ancestors were actually Polish and they had Polish nationality. So some people in some countries, they can actually apply for this kind of a document. But again, this is not a document that will allow you to enter the country and then to stay in country. This is just a document that confirms this fact that either your grandma or maybe two of your great-grandparents had actually had Polish nationality. And it will give you some benefits, such as, for example, you will have some discounts in museums, or maybe in some emergency cases you will have access to national free of charge healthcare. So you have some benefits of that. At the same time, if you have the Polish card, then this allows you to apply directly for the permanent residency. So I think this is also very important for those who have this document and who come here with the purpose of actually staying and residing in Poland.
So they still need to show the purpose, what they are doing, like work-wise, or no? In this?
I mean, if they want to apply directly for the permanent residency based on the fact that they have this Polish card, then this is not required. They just have to show that they actually have this card and that they intend to stay in Poland permanently.
Okay. So I have another question regarding permanent residence card. Matter of fact, any card that any permits that we apply in Poland, is there a specific requirement that they need to have a lawyer, or they can apply by themselves as well?
No, everybody can apply by themselves. There is absolutely no requirement to have a lawyer, and basically I think that in many of the procedure you can handle it very well by yourself indeed. But if you need a lawyer, and we're actually talking about legal representation, then you can also come to a place like us, like ours, so the Multicultural Center and our Migrant Info Point, because here we provide consultation and also legal advice free of charge, also considering your application for residence permit. So if you have any doubts about what documents you should prepare and how to submit your application, or maybe throughout the process your inspector contacted you and you are not sure exactly what to do, then we always welcome you here. And also please remember that you can contact the migration office in Krakow directly. They are always happy to help and to provide you with information. Every once in a while they have the so-called information Saturdays. So for example, if you are working during the week and cannot contact them, then you can go on their website and look for the nearest Saturday, and then even then you can go and ask them. And also here in our Migrant Info Point, the representative of the migration office comes once a month. So even here you can come, and you can come directly to somebody from the migration office, you know, even if you want your application papers to be checked if everything is fine and is correct. Because as long as there is no requirement for a legal representation in the procedure, then I would actually advise you to make sure that your application papers are correct and that you have all documents that are needed, because if there is some mistake or if some documents are missing, then it will prolong your procedure. And as we already discussed, it already takes a little long. So to make it faster, it is good to make sure that you have everything well prepared and ready.
Okay, thank you. And for our viewers, I have same request. If you are facing or any issue, please do reach out to Multicultural Center. They will try to help you with your legal documents. Sometime as a foreigner, I also face issues where I was stuck with the Polish language and I don't know which document I should provide them and what documentation they are asking for. So definitely you can visit Multicultural Center and they will try to help you as much as they can. And my another question is regarding legal help that provided by government to foreigners. people who doesn't speak Polish. Is there any?
Well, indeed, some procedures may be challenging because all the procedures, they have to be made in the Polish language. So indeed, it can be a challenge sometimes. I mean, if we speak about the residence permit, here we are a little bit, let's say, lucky, because even if you look at the forms that you have to fill in, they would usually have the explanation both in Polish, in English, Russian, and sometimes also some other languages. So it looks like that. In some procedures, so for example, if you have some procedures with the border guards for expulsion or for international protection, then they would actually be obliged to provide you with an interpreter if you don't speak Polish well enough, and you actually have the right to ask for it. But also there are situations and there are procedures where not only it has to be done in Polish, but also you don't have actually any government assistance concerning translation. So in this kind of situation, I mean, only just recently we had a possibility to provide people with assistance in forms of somebody actually going with them, I don't know, to the hospital, to the doctor, to the office, to translate, but also to be some kind of support. So you can also contact our migrant info point if you need something like that. I mean, we do not provide this kind of assistance permanently, but from time to time we have such a possibility. And I think that in general, like reaching out to your local NGOs is a good idea if you need this kind of support.
So is there any specific site there where they can find this translator if they require help from? Because sometimes people like to pay as well, because they said like, if my issue is get resolved, I'm okay to pay for it, right? So is there any specific maybe government approved translator? Is there?
Yes, indeed, we have the so-called sworn translators. So these people, they have to pass a state exam to prove that they actually know a specific foreign language, and then they are like approved by the government. And if you go on the website of the Ministry of Justice, then there is a list of those sworn translators, like in every city and in every language. I mean, we don't have the sworn translator from every language, so sometimes here we would have to struggle, but in general, the most common languages, I think you will find a sworn translation without any bigger problem.
Okay. So my another question is regarding challenges that you face with maybe foreigners that comes to you for help.
I mean, I think that the challenges is like what my clients come is like because they face some obstacles, and they do have they do need to face some challenges. Yeah, because basically not only legal procedures are sometimes very complicated, and they are complicated for the Polish citizens as well, and sometimes even for me as a lawyer, I have to admit that how the law is written is not always very transparent and is not always very clear. So there are these kind of obstacles, and of course if you are a foreigner, then also you come from a different culture, also a legal culture, so you may be used to a different kind of procedures, so maybe you are used to something which is less formal, for example. Okay, so then once you are actually required to, you know, phrase your sentences in an exactly specific way, or you know, do things in this way, then maybe it is not the easiest the easiest for you. Of course, the language barrier that we have already discussed is also, I think, one of the biggest ones. Having said that, I must say that, like, from my experience, I find it incredible, you know, how well people deal with things given like all those challenges that they have, you know, and it's always like a big challenge, I think, to come to a different country, and especially if you have to deal with legal issues, and people find like really some like great solution and some like great inner force to actually deal with all these kind of situations. So here really I have a lot of respect also for my own clients for doing that and for making these kind of decisions. You know, I think like changing a place of stay like that, it really opens you, but it also like makes you more resilient and makes you stronger and makes you innovative. Yeah, so this is something that I really appreciate.
So being in multicultural, you definitely meet many foreigners every day, and definitely I think they also have a big impact because of you, because you are helping them. And my another question is regarding people who came here, but for some reason they are now getting deported. What are the challenges? We know that they face many, but how they can maybe save themselves going back to their country, and if there any way?
Yeah, this is a very, very difficult subject indeed that you brought up. And yes, well, I think that one of the most important things that has to be said is that actually if somebody, like, I don't know, overstayed their visa or their residence permit expired and they still stayed here and didn't apply for a new one, or for any other reason they are staying on the Polish territory without a legal title to it, then it is not possible they are like taken from the street and deported from one day to the other. So I think this is very important, because I think if somebody finds themselves in this kind of situation, this is very stressful, and this is the scenario that often comes to our minds. So first of all, it has to be underlined that there are like specific administrative procedures that have to be conducted before somebody can actually be deported back to their country. So basically these kind of procedures are done by the border guards, and they are the so-called expulsion procedures, like procedures who are obliging a person to return to their country, either voluntary or forcefully. There are some exceptional situations where even if you are staying in an irregular manner, then you can still get a residence permit and not be deported. But again, this is like exceptional circumstances. So first of all, if you have family here in Poland, but family we mean it like in a very closed, like limited way, because this mainly concerns spouses and parents and their minor children. So if, for example, your spouse is actually staying in Poland, and even if they are Polish citizens but not necessarily, then your life to family right will be protected. And even if the border guards conduct such a procedure, then it is possible that they will actually give you a humanitarian stay permit and not oblige you to go back. Another situation is when it is dangerous to go back to your home country. If you can show like the real and individual danger, that you can be tortured, that you can die, that you can have some very serious trouble, then also you can ask for a humanitarian stay permit and then not be deported back to your home country.
But you will never go back if you will apply these two.
I mean, if the border guards decide not to oblige you to return to your country, but they decide to give you such a humanitarian stay permit, then basically you are allowed to stay in Poland. If at any point you will leave Poland and go back home, then depending on the circumstances, such a permit may be taken away from you, but not necessarily. So this will always be very, very
complicated process.
Yes, this will be very, very individual. And also one of the if you are actually obliged to go back to your own country, then basically in the decision will not only oblige you to go back, and they will give you like a deadline of usually 30 days to leave Poland voluntarily, and they will also often give you the so-called re-entry ban. So not only you have to leave, but also for a certain period of time, usually it will be 6 months, you will not be able to come back, you will not be able to apply for a visa to come back. Having said that, please remember that it is also possible to cancel this entry ban once you actually already leave. So you also have such possibilities, so you might like get to come back to Poland
But
quicker.
if they leave, for example, that some people have like 6-month ban. So in that 6 month, if they leave and now their passport, they have this stamp, and next time when they go for apply for visa, do they need to explain why and what happened?
Maybe it depends on the specific consulate and on their circumstances and on where, when, and how they apply for a visa. But I think that it might be important. The circumstances of issuing such an entry ban might be important. I mean, whether it was honest mistake and you only overstayed for 2 days, or maybe the circumstances were a little bit different. But the law does not specify that they have to be asked or they cannot be asked or something like that. So individually, maybe it will be important, maybe not.
So people who actually apply for their residence permit card here before expiring their visa, and now suddenly they plan to go to India, for example, and now when they're going, because they don't have visa to go back, they have a passport, Indian passport, but they don't have a residence permit
yet.
of Krakow.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, what can happen and how that can be avoided?
Yeah, well, because basically if you submit your application for residence permit, then you should get another stamp in your passport, and this passport confirms that you successfully submitted your application and you are waiting for the decision. This stamp allows you to stay in Poland and wait for your decision concerning the temporary residence permit. It allows you to leave Poland legally, but unfortunately it will not allow you to come back. So if you have to leave actually because you have no choice, then in order to come back you have to get a new visa.
But they will put some stamp on your passport to deportation or something. It will be a same process. When
no, as long as you have a procedure like TRC procedure, which is pending and where you submitted your application successfully, then during this procedure you are not obliged to stay in Poland and wait for the decision. You can leave in any moment and you will not get any entry ban, you will not get any negative decision, anything like that. The only problem will be when you actually want to come back here, because then you will need to get a new visa. If a visa is required, or you will need to wait for your visa-free period to be renewed. But also, if you plan to leave, if you have to leave when your procedure is pending, then also please remember to appoint somebody as your representative. Because if when you are not here, the migration office will try to contact you and they will not reach you, then again, we already mentioned that a little bit before, it can have negative consequences for your procedure.
So if you, example, you left Poland, but you had apply for residence card, but now you put someone in charge instead of you, and that person can also maybe receive your Carta Pobytu on behalf of you, or no?
They can represent you during your procedure up to receiving the decision, but if you want to get your Carta Pobytu, and here we are speaking about the plastic card, then actually you have to pick it up in person, because yet again you will have to give your fingerprints to have that.
So, but person is already in India now. So how person will come back?
So again, they have to get a new visa and then they come back with a visa again.
Okay, so if they have a card, they can show that this card is pending there, I just need to go and collect?
No, they apply for a visa based on the general terms. So for example, if they are working and they came with a working visa and they applied for an employment type of TRC, then again they will apply for a work type visa.
So there is no chance that, oh, I have my card waiting, I will go.
No, unfortunately not. As much as it would make sense and many people would love that, then unfortunately for now this is not the case.
So my last question to you, regarding new regulation rules, if there is or it has been changed?
Well, recently we didn't have any major changes in the migration law. I mean, there is the new minister on migration, and he announced a new document which is like the Poland's migration policy, but right now it is just a policy. So we don't know the details and what will be the legislative effects of the said documents. But also, if there are any changes that are important for foreigners staying in Krakow, then we always announce them we always try to announce them on our Facebook profile. So also please, if you want to subscribe and if you want to follow us, then you are very much welcome, and yeah, please do.
Yes. Thank you, Anna, for joining us today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please stay tuned for more interesting episode, and please subscribe and like our channel. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, and thank you also very much for inviting me. It was a great pleasure, and again, please remember to see us at the Multicultural Center here in Krakow, Zabłocie 20.